And also, if I do sound a little funny, it's because I'm just recovering from a cold. So apologies if you can't hear me. I'm happy to repeat myself. Yesterday I felt ill and like I'm in the recovery phase. So bear with me for sure. So okay, cool. We do have a question, so I'll go ahead and unmute. So Kundai, over to you. What is your question?
Hello. Well, it's good to meet everybody. So my very first question is just maybe a brief overview of what a product manager does during the day, and also if this is an okay career path for someone who's coming from a strictly marketing perspective.
Okay, cool, awesome. So that's a great question. So first, what does like the day of product manager look like? And if it's something that folks can transition from like a marketing background. So that's good. So let me start with the definition of what is a product manager. So simply put, a product manager is hired in a traditional company to help bridge the gap between customer needs and kind of like business opportunities. So if I had to simplify, there's someone that's standing in between the customers and the business. Every business on this planet has one form of goal, whether it's to make money, whether it's to just like acquire users, acquire data, or what have you. So it's the responsibility of the product manager to then figure out how they can meet that business goal. And the best way to meet the business goal is by trying to understand what your customers need and what your customers want. So a lot of the times, product managers in different phases will go back and forth between the customers and the business. So now, if I had to then differentiate between the main functions of product managers. So one, there's the direction aspect or the strategy aspect, and then there's the execution or delivery aspect. In the strategy aspect, that is when you're trying to figure out what to do and how to do things and sort of like figure out the direction the company should go. In this case, you're spending a lot of time doing a lot of user research with your customers, doing market research, understanding what trends there are in the industries, what are the things your competitors are doing, what are the new ways customers are either taking in information or solving the problems that they experience today. And they are trying to find out like either loopholes or inefficiencies that you can sort of like exploit for those business needs. And then you're trying to come up with like some sort of proposal that you pitch to your company to gather resources in order to build and actually take to market. So that's the direction aspect of it. And then there's the execution aspect of it. And that execution, you're mainly spending your time with cross-functional team members to actually push that product out of the door. So the first part, you've come up with the product or come up with the idea that will solve a particular problem. And then next up, you're then trying to bring that product to life. So then you're working with your engineers, you're working with your designers at the different stages of product development. You're taking that back to customers to validate it, to see if it's actually solved that problem initially. You're working with marketing, you're working with customer support, and you're trying to push that product out of the door. Once you've actually built it, you now want to actually spend time doing enablement and product marketing and getting the word out so people actually know about this product, so you can actually get it into the hands of customers. You want to test it, measure it, and see if it's doing well. So that's the direction aspect. So now hopefully I've been able to explain that without talking too much or without confusing you further. And now for your second question, can you pivot into product management from a background like marketing? And I wanted to start by saying it doesn't matter what your background is, you can actually pivot into product management. So product management is one of those roles that you don't necessarily have a defined set of skills or background that you need to fall into in order to be a successful product manager. Because if you think about it, the way I've defined it is you're the person in between the business and the customer. And those require different kinds of skills, right? That even if you put 5 product managers in one room, they can have different set of skills to help solve that problem. So it really depends on what industry you're in, what company you're in, what kinds of products that you serve. Ultimately, the main skill that you need to showcase as a product manager are great problem solving skills, great customer empathy. So you need to be able to understand who your customers are, be obsessed with them, and try and figure out the problems that they experience. You need to be a great communicator because you're communicating with customers, your business, all the different cross-functional members, all of that good stuff. You need to be organized because then you're organizing information from different people in different ways. So it's a lot to do, it's a lot to navigate around, but ultimately it's a very fun, rewarding role that can actually be very impactful to your career and to customers into business, and has the ability to change the way customers interact with different products. So hopefully I've been able to answer that question, Kundai. I'm happy if you have any follow-ups to that, happy to like respond to that if there was something that wasn't particularly clear. I'll take that as like a thumbs up. So does anyone else have any other question, any questions relating to product management, or if you want me to dive deeper in to describe what I just answered? Thomas, yes, you raised your hand, so go ahead. What is your question?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, I see a lot of product managers versus program managers versus technical program managers, technical product managers. Can you kind of like explain the differences between them? Is there a difference between them that I should be aware of?
That's a good question. So product managers, program managers, there's technical product managers and all of that good stuff. Actually, I'll answer this using an analogy. So I tweeted about this earlier today. So like, Thomas, are you a big music fan? Feel free to like, no, do you like music? Okay, cool. Do you know who DJ Khaled is? Okay, awesome, great. So this is like an example that I like to use and also differentiate between the product, like what product management is. So DJ Khaled is an example of who a product manager is in the music industry. So for those who like music or listen to DJ Khaled, you realize that DJ Khaled doesn't actually like sing or rap or do anything on the tracks, right? All his productions, all his music is featuring a bunch of other people, right? And another way you can think about it is like, oh, but maybe he produces, but he actually does not produce or actually make any of the beats, like interestingly enough. But what he's exceptionally good at is understanding what the industry needs. So for example, if a genre is quite popular or is very interesting and has been growing, he'll try and figure out and identify who are the top artists there, build relationships with them, bring them together, people who otherwise wouldn't be together under a specific vision, and then will encourage them to make music and then kind of like put that out. So that's like an example of just like a regular product manager. You're understanding what the user needs. Ultimately, you're working with like amazing, talented people, which is your designers or your developers, to be able to create music. So when it now comes to, let me now answer the technical product manager. So I like explaining that as like Major Lazer, for example. If anyone is familiar with Major Lazer, so they're a group with a couple members, and they do different genres of music. The difference here is, they also do not sing or rap on the songs. They typically collaborate with other artists, but they understand production. They actually make some of the beats. They understand the technical know-how to actually bring all the musical sounds together, whether that's like a fusion or like Afro beats or whatever. So technical product manager can actually be in the weeds. Sometimes they're required to go down in the trenches and actually solve customer problems and be involved in building whatever vision they're trying to actually see. So similar to Major Lazer, they would actually do the work to decide what kind of instrumental, what kind of sound actually goes into the music, and then they'll collaborate with other parties because you can't build a product on your own. So that's what technical product manager is. Program manager can be interchanged for product manager. Sometimes it depends on the company, but typically program manager is reserved for people who aren't necessarily building like digital products. So programs could be whether you're working on hardware, for example. I know, like, at Apple, they used to call a lot of people program managers, or if you're working on services, or if you're working with people, you're not necessarily building software, it can be program management, even though you're still doing the same thing, like interfacing between business and customers. So I would say that is sort of like how I like to like think about it, but ultimately you're still there to solve problems for the customers and also bridge the gap between the customers and the business. So hopefully that explained it, and using that analogy like might have helped. So regular product manager, think DJ Khaled. Technical product manager, think Major Lazer, because you actually have to know how to use the softwares, actually build, make the beats and all of that good stuff, and still work with the artist that actually puts things out there. And then program manager, product manager can be used interchangeably. Cool. But great question, Thomas. Honestly, it's something that I know a lot of people ask, and hopefully that you are content with that answer. I really do want to write a blog post about that. I did a Twitter thread about like why DJ Khaled is like like a great example of a product manager by trying to understand what he does. I might link it below later on if I have the time. But cool. Adebayo, you've asked if you want a question. You're raising your hand. I'm gonna unmute you now. What is your question?
Hi, Sefunmi. How are you doing?
How are you?
So my question is, what is the difference between a business analyst and a product manager? I mean, you see someone called a business analyst within a company, and they technically do what a product manager does. So like, I would like to know what the actual difference is between the two. So the other question I would like to ask is, what is the path to getting a job as a product manager at a fund company? Those are my questions. Thanks.
Cool, awesome. So first question, difference between business analyst and a product manager. Second, how can you get a job at a fund company? So to answer the first question, I actually want to start by saying that some people might actually be working as a product manager at their current company, but they don't have the title. That happens all the time. I've spoken to several people who, when they transitioned, they were like, I actually was doing this role for 3 years before they eventually gave me the product manager title. So it might be that you might have the title business analyst in your company, but you're still doing things that product managers do. So from what I understand about business analysts, again, some job descriptions vary from company to company, so I can't speak for all companies. But with business analysts, you're doing a lot of trying to understand how internal functions of the company is running. So think about it as like, the company itself are your customers, and so the company is your customer and also the person that you serve, and you're trying to find opportunities to optimize, whether it's like revenue in certain areas, or spend, or using whatever tools, or trying to figure out opportunities to improve efficiencies. So that's where a lot of the similarities can actually come in, because you're actually doing the work to do the research, try and find opportunities for the business to actually exploit that you can actually implement. You might be part of actually implementing it. So there might not be that external impact that you're directly serving the customers of the business, but you could be impacting your customers, which are the employees of the company and stuff like that, but you might not be getting the formal title. So I would say like it depends, like depends the company that you're working with. But a traditional product manager will typically have a clear distinction of the kinds of customers that they're dealing with. They will typically follow the product development lifecycle. They'll most likely work with cross-functional teams, whether it's just internally or externally. They're made to like define vision, roadmap, 1-year plan. They plan quarterly OKRs, and their day-to-day looks like a lot of like fighting fires, trying to talk to customers, trying to align their team, trying to make sure that people are working on the right things at the right time. So those are like key examples of what product managers will do, versus business analysts is, very research heavy, very report heavy, depending on what the company that you're working at. So hopefully that was able to answer some of the questions. Again, it might mean that some of the responsibilities of the business analyst is in line with what product managers do. And in that case, you need to speak to your internal team to either give you that title or give you more opportunities to work as a product manager. So now the next question is, how can you get a job at a fund company? So that, I don't think there's like an easy answer to that. And I'll answer that question by answering how you can get a job at any company as a product manager. So ultimately, product management is one of those roles that you have the catch-22. And the catch-22 is you need the job before you get experience, but you need experience to be able to get the job. Some companies have done a great job at creating APM programs for people who have not even had the experience, but they're curious about product management and they want to see that people who are excited about the role, who can get into the role and use that chance to train. So I'll talk about that path first before I talk about even just like zoning out and trying to understand what else can improve your chances. So one talk that actually we had a talk last week, Catherine, and she put it so perfectly well that landing a job as a product manager is about gaining trust, right? You need to gain trust in your employer that you can do the job. I've done a previous presentation where I talked about when I've spoken to like hundreds of hiring managers and I asked them the same question, hey, why don't you want to hire junior product managers? And they all had similar questions. And I'm going to read out those questions to you because I have the deck open. So the big things that they came up with was like, number one, can I trust you? An important one. Number two, do I have time to mentor you? Number three, what is your growth potential? Number four, is it worth the risk? And now let me talk about risk for a second. If you're a product manager, you're going to be in charge of executing a project that someone has clearly defined, spent lots of months doing a lot of research, and the execution phase of a project can cost between $100,000 on average if you're working at like any regular sized company to millions or tens of millions of dollars. And this isn't money that they're giving you to spend, but the cost of the resources that you have to interface with and manage, because you're working with designers, developers, people in marketing, go-to-market, and all of that. So that is a lot of responsibility for someone to manage. And if you think about it, and if you put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager, would I hire someone who does not have any proven experience to manage this project? Or do I just like spend maybe 3 months long in the recruiting cycle, pay someone a higher salary for someone who has a lot of the experience? So ultimately, the common question that they have is like, do you have practical knowledge or do you have applicable knowledge of transferable skills that can show me that you're a good enough hire? So a lot of people have that question when trying to hire a candidate. So let's say you solve that problem. The way to solve that problem is by bridging the gap between what is expected of you on the job and where you're at right now. So you need to bridge that gap by gaining real world experience. You can gain real world experience in several ways. Next thing, you need to be able to show your work. I like to tell people, show your work and prove to hiring managers that you know what you're doing, you know what you're saying, you've been through it, you've done that, whether it's like using examples of school project, whether you were previously an entrepreneur, whether you've had experience doing something very tangential to product management, that could be a way for you to actually break in, to be able to show your work. And then the last bit is like a ton of networking. Networking or trying to build relationships with people who are decision makers who can make a call on whether or not they can hire you. So I'll say those are like the three paths. And going back to what I mentioned around companies who have created paths or APMs for people to actually break in. So every fan company has like an APM outside of Apple, I believe. And essentially, so let me give you an example of one example that I noticed firsthand. So Shopify recently announced their APM program, and they had about 10,000 people apply, right? And there were only 10 roles, I think 10 or 15, not up to 20, I'm pretty sure. So you can imagine the volume of people that are trying to get APM roles. And I work with folks in the collab program, and a ton of people actually applied for the APM program. Luckily for us, we had one person who was able to make it into the APM program, but a lot of people didn't make it through. And I reached out to the hiring managers because one of the things that we do at collab very well is build relationships with some of these companies. So I reached out to the hiring manager and I asked them, it's like, hey, what is the criteria for hiring someone for an APM program, even though they don't have product management experience? And this will range from company to company, and it's different for every single hiring manager. But they made it plain and simple, and it's something that they talk about in their culture. Is like, we value entrepreneurship experience over anything else. So it could mean that, if you want to land a job at Fang or any of these top tech companies, you might need to be an entrepreneur. You might have to have started a business in one area of your life and taking it into a certain stage. That could be something that you could do. Different companies value different things. So for example, Apple values people who are deeply technical. That's like an example of something that you can think about doing. Amazon values people who have MBAs. I don't know why they do that, but they still do anyways. Microsoft also values people who have computer science backgrounds, even though that's not a requirement anymore. But you need to spend time doing the research and trying to understand what do these companies care about, and then how can you kind of tailor yourself to that. But working at Fang it's great. Everyone wants to do that, is what's celebrated. I don't think that this is the only way to go, but it's something that if that's what you feel would make you very happy, then I would say spend time, do the work, prepare, and make the connections, and then sort of go for it. So hopefully that answers your question. I know Miriam, you had your hand up. I don't know if you still wanted to ask your question, Miriam. And so Dewey said, answer this question. So Miriam, do you still want to answer a question? Feel free to let me know in the chat and I can unmute you. And then Michael has already posed. So Michael has a question, but I just wanted to check. Okay, Miriam still has a question. So Miriam, what is your question? And then I'll go to you, Michael.
Yeah, so I put my hand down because you kind of did answer it a little bit with the APM programs, but I'm currently still in college, and I was kind of wondering, outside of what I'm doing now with networking and stuff like that, how I can stand out or still gain experience, even if it's not through a technical APM program.
Yeah, that's a good question. So one thing that I love and I wish I did while I was in college, because college you have so many opportunities to apply for internships, which are less competitive than APM programs. So what I would advise you to do is have as many projects or side projects as you can that actually solve real problems, because you want to showcase that. One of the things, so I used to, in one of my old companies that I worked for, I used to hire interns. So we'll go to different schools, top schools, and we'll interview people for internship roles, for product management internship roles. And the things that we always prioritize, especially when we're screening resumes. So it was my job to screen resumes and do interviews. So if I don't do, so I'll typically do both, but if I didn't have time to do interviews, I would screen them. And for me and all the other people that I reach out to, most times we look for people who have built stuff or who have a side project section, whereby we can go to their website, see a bunch of things that they built. Honestly, I always like when people have built one thing very well. So if you go ahead and build one thing extremely well, it's live, I can play with it, I can download it, and I can see that, oh, this is Miriam's app and all that good stuff. That will make me interested in learning more about you and thinking about, hey, how were you able to come up with this idea? How do you solve this problem? How is it doing? So to give yourself that competitive advantage, you want to showcase that you've been through what it feels like to be a product manager. You've built stuff, you've built a product. So that can actually set you apart. Another thing that you can do is try to volunteer at a startup part-time. Reach out to different startups in your area and try and work on a project for them, pitch the CEO and say hey, I want to help you do this, or let me try and organize, some data for you, or try and look at all the reviews or customer complaints and try and come up with an idea on how to solve a problem. You might not end up building something or working with the engineers directly, but if you can showcase that and say on your resume that, oh, you were able to improve this metric by X or Y, you're already sounding like a product manager. You've already bridged the gap between the customer and the business, and you can showcase that on your resume, which can actually find you at the top of the stack because you have that competitive advantage. Next thing I'll do is do a lot of networking, cold email people on LinkedIn, reach out to hiring managers for coffees, ask them if they have internships available, ask them to connect you with other people, learn about their stories. Another thing that also helped a lot of people that I know is like a lot of people write a lot, they'll blog, they'll break down products, they'll showcase their product thinking skills. So I would say like those would be the things that I will do, work on as many projects as possible, look for internships, work with like a nonprofit or like a small business around you or a startup, and network like crazy. So hopefully that was helpful, Miriam. Best of luck in your product management endeavors as you look for your next gig. Okay, Miriam, do you have any other questions? Cool. Michael, over to you.
All right, so I had a question for you, Sefunmi.
Sure.
How does product management and project management differ, and how do they intersect, if anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's my favorite question. Okay, not my favorite question, but one of my favorite questions. Because a lot of folks ask me this question a lot. That is product management, project management. Are they the same? Are they different? So let me start by saying project management was actually born. Project management started long before product management. So it was very popular in the construction industry or in anything relating to like hardware or building something physical. Or trying to like manage a project, right? Or anything project related that wasn't necessarily software, that had a clear life cycle on how to do things. So project management relates to the budget that you have, the time that you have and the resources, which sometimes are often like a function of each other. You have like time, budget, and resources. And as a project manager, you're supposed to manage all three to make sure that you deliver a project on time, right? It can be something as like putting up like a building, right, in like a downtown metropolitan area. That is a project that will typically have a project manager or several project managers. I'm like, hey, this is the budget. We want to make sure that everything is doing well. Interiors has this budget, plumbing has this budget, whatnot. So you're the person kind of pulling the strings, maintaining everything, signing off on everything, like purchase orders, making sure that time, budget, and people are all in place. If there's something that's wrong or missing, you can kind of fill those gaps. So if someone is sick and you need to replace that person. So that's what project management is. It's very organizational heavy. So you need to be super organized because again, you're dealing with time, resources, and people. You need to make sure that people know the things that they need to do. You need to make sure that everyone is staffed appropriately in the right places, spending the right time doing the right things. So that is what a typical project management job looks like. Today, they are still project managers in the software space, but it looks slightly different, but I'll get there in a second. So with product management defined the right way, because there's product management, sometimes you see product owners, you see scrum masters, and there's like other subsets. For product manager, the typical life cycle of a product manager is you try to get as early as possible to define what problem you're even trying to solve. So even before you've decided that you want to build this building, you would have done the work to think about, okay, there's this plot of land that's going to be available. What are we going to do with it? We can build a car park, we can build a school, we can build a mall there. But you have identified that, the problem that you want to solve for the city or whatever it is, like there's a housing crisis and you need to house more people. And there's only this small plot of land. But now if you create this building, that can actually like house more people, all of that. It can create like, there's then economic benefit for people around the area. So you're spending the time even before the project manager has been hired to solve some sort of problem, or you're giving some form of space to define a hypothesis that is there that will bridge customer gap, some customer needs with business needs. Because the customers that are looking for housing, there's like business construction people who are like, they have money, they want to make more money and all of that good stuff. So you're trying to understand that. And then once you've gotten that signed off, you've convinced people, let's say you've convinced, customers that, okay, this is what they want. You've convinced the government, you've convinced the building company. Then if you get the green light, now it's time to execute that project, right? So now you're then working with the people that are executed. So project management is an aspect under product management. So typically in the execution or delivery phase, where you're actually working with your team, working in a Scrum, Agile way, that is sort of when the project management aspect of product management comes in. And again, it depends on what company that you're working at. There are some companies that product managers only do the first half, and then they let other people they hand it off to a project manager or scrum master to just make sure that the engineers are productive, they know what they need to do, they've written all their user stories, everything is clear. It really depends. But oftentimes you have to do it end to end, whereby you're figuring out the problem, you've identified the problem, and then you also need to work with the engineers to actually see it through. So that is sort of like how I like to differentiate between product and project. So project is an aspect on a product versus project management. You don't really get a say to determine what kind of project you even get to work on. Typically that's like handed to you, or you inherit it by some way, shape or form, or you're hired to actually like see that through, because you have amazing organizational skills, people skills, and then you can actually see things through to the end. So hopefully that was helpful.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I also had a second question, kind of similar to what Miriam was saying about being in school. So in my situation, I'm a fourth year student. I'm graduating April of, or I will be done school, April of next year. So thanks for that. My approach to like trying to get into product management is either through like a recent grad program or an internship. I guess based on your experience, like how do you think someone like me in the situation would navigate trying to get into product management?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I would say like same thing applies. If you want to showcase your abilities, and I like to tell the story of Mark. Mark is someone who I look up to. I wrote about him in my book, and he wanted to be a product manager, and he was fascinated by the role. And what he tried to do was try to bridge the gap in his skills. So he kept a notebook of the things that he knew and the things that he didn't know, and he tried to find, hey, what didn't I know? So he did that by studying different job descriptions, and actually reaching out to shadow product managers. So he will cold email product managers in the network, and he will say, please, can I shadow you, even if it's for a day? He lives in Toronto, but he flew to San Francisco to shadow a product manager for 2 weeks. And he pitched the company and said, I will literally wash toilets and grab coffee. I just want to be in the room. I don't think you need to do that. But ultimately, of course, they didn't let him wash toilets or do anything. They actually engaged him because, like, yeah, you're not losing anything by just letting someone sit into meetings. If they're a good person, if they sign an NDA, if they want to learn, like, and he kept a journal of like the things that he didn't know, any words or any sentences of things that the product manager was doing that he didn't understand. He kept a journal and he tried to figure out, how can I actually close this gap? Okay, user research. What is user research? How can I do user research? He read books on user research. He actually then went ahead to do some user research, understand a lot of that. Oh, how do I work with engineers? How do I work with developers? Then you can try and figure out, okay, what ways can I do that? You can maybe try and work at a hackathon or go to a hackathon and understand what's it like working with engineers and designers, try and work with them for a little bit so you get some of that experience. So you can just treat it like a treasure quest or like a game, and you try to like level up and close the gap between where you're at and where what's expected of you. And while you're doing that, you also need to show your work, talk about what you're learning, whether that's like out in the open on LinkedIn, whether you're keeping a blog, you're posting that on your LinkedIn, because when recruiters are searching, you want to make recruiters' lives easier by putting it at your top of your LinkedIn, aspiring product manager, right? And now you're talking about, oh, this is what you learned. You did user research for this nonprofit, or even just for this project. Here are your learnings. So if the recruiter is looking at it and it's like, oh, Michael is like taking a lot of these boxes. Like he has a blog post on user research. He's done this. He's doing this. Blah blah. Like, let me reach out to him. So you want to make sure that, again, you want to gain trust. You want to be prepared for a time when you're face to face with the hiring manager, and the person is saying, Michael, tell me about your experience as a product manager. I want to know, what would you do in this scenario? And you just be honest and say, hey, I haven't really been in this scenario, but these are other similar scenarios I've been in. Let me tell you what I did. Let me tell you what I learned. Let me tell you what I do differently. And just being open, just being honest, I think like that can really take you incredibly far. I know people throw around the word networking a lot, that, oh, just network is like as if it's like a catch-all. But I think when you're doing it, just being very intentional, reaching out to people, being honest about what you want to learn from them, how you want to like have those conversations, and how you be meaningful about following up and doing the things that they tell you to do. I think that really goes a long way. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's awesome, Sefunmi. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to help. Any other questions? Feel free to like raise up your hand, put it in the chat if you don't want to speak. And this is a safe space. Happy answering all the questions that we've had so far. We still have time for about like 2 questions before we open it up for networking. Okay, cool. Deborah has a question. Awesome. What is your question, Deborah? You can go ahead and unmute if you wanted to ask your question. Oh, I think you muted. There we go. Deborah, can you speak now? Can you? Okay, let's see. Let's try that one more time. Oh, you can't. I'm giving you permission. You should be able to now. There's like a prompt that. Okay, could you try now? Interesting. Okay, try now. Okay, so we have 3 questions. So Deborah, could you try now? It should work for you now, Deborah. Okay, we'll get back to you. So do you mind then putting the question in the chat? Okay, cool. So Akari has the next question, and then we'll go to Taibat.
Okay, hi everyone. So my question really is, I'm interested to find out more information about the Collab Product Management Program. So I'm wondering if you can throw more light on that.
Okay, cool, awesome. I'm happy to answer what the program is. So at Collab, our goal is to give folks the confidence that they need to successfully prepare and transition into their careers. In terms of our product management program, we like to call it the end-to-end product management experience that you need to successfully transition. So we have 2 programs for that. There's the Spring program, which is essentially talking more about and working you through product management fundamentals, what it means to be a product manager, breaking down the role, understanding what you need to do as a product manager, doing a lot of the user research. The first part of product management that I expressed, which is the doing user research, trying to understand and come up with like good problems, trying to be that person that can understand and uncover customer needs and customer problems. And sort of like structure it and document it in a way that you can actually put it forward as a proposal. So that is the Spring program. It's 4 weeks, it's self-paced, and it's cohort-based. So you get to learn with other amazing, enthusiastic product managers who want to also like transition into the industry. And then if you like, you can actually then take that idea or that problem that you've identified into the 8-week Collab bootcamp. So that's where you get to actually build out the idea, work with 2 engineers, a designer. You would also have a mentor that will work with you on a week-to-week basis to sort of like keep you on track so that you can actually build something that people can use. So the emphasis on our Collab program is building, executing, and getting to the space where you can actually publish something that you can actually take into interviews that will give you some of that real world experience. So that is sort of like the 2 programs that we have. So there's the Sprint, and then which is 4 weeks, and then there's a Collab program, which is 8 weeks. You get to work with designers and developers. Hopefully that answers your question. So we have 1 more cohort left this year, which is Spring 16. So the Collab program is invitation only, so you do have to complete the Spring program first. And then from those, depending on how those folks or that cohort performs, then you receive an invitation to join the collab program where you get to actually build it out over 8 weeks. So if you're interested, you're welcome to, sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. If you're interested, you're welcome to go on our website and apply. But did you have any follow-up questions or Carrie regarding the collab program?
No, actually, I'm good. Thanks for explaining.
No worries. Happy I was able to answer your question. Deborah, how are you? How are you doing? Would you be able to speak this time? Just checking in on you.
Hi, yes. It's finally working now.
No worries.
Okay. So my question, so I actually don't know if you've answered this question already. I kind of like logged out for a bit there. But just in case you are yet to. So for somebody who is, so like for me, I'm in the banking sector, I'm in finance, and I work with people in business transformation and all that, but I'm looking to move into product management. What are your best tips or practices, or what do you think can help? So in terms of like certifications, I know about the CSPO. What do you think are the best, in quotes, certifications that can help stand me apart from people when I'm ready to apply? I'm not ready yet, but I'm just trying to like plan ahead. So what are your best practices or tips for people trying to switch?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start by saying I'm personally like not a big fan of like traditional education, because if you really think about it, I don't think there's any traditional educational path that really and truly prepares people for the jobs that they want. So I tend to stay away from certifications, and certifications is no longer a trusted way to see if somebody can do the job or not, because you can have all the certifications in the world, but you can still struggle to find a job. I know people with PhDs in different areas that still struggle to find a job, because they think that the more credentials you have, that you're able to land a job. The truth is, there is credibility over credentials. So a lot of people look to try and get a certificate program and all of that stuff. And I wouldn't think about it that way. I'm not saying you shouldn't get those, because those have their own ways of teaching you and educating you. But ultimately, it's all about showing your work and showing that you can do the work and you have the skills that they're looking for. Because you can take a certification and then look at a job posting and then not meet any of the criteria there, because they're asking if you've worked on a cross-functional team, if you've done user research, if you've been able to like maintain a roadmap. And not to mention that a lot of the certifications are very theoretical. So when you're giving examples in schools, I've been part of interviewing with several companies, and a lot of the times, if people are talking to things that they did in school as part of a school project, we tend not to count that or place a lot of high emphasis on that, because that's not realistic. There are no high stakes. So what you want to do is put yourself in real world situations so that you can actually gain real transferable skills. And even though you failed, like one of the ways that, like when I tell my story of how I transitioned to product management, I built a product, the product flopped, but ultimately I was able to talk about the things that I didn't do well and the things that I could have done better. And that's what sort of I kickstarted my career, because there's a lot of experience that comes with those failures and haven't done that before. So I would recommend trying to do things that are more suited to the role, that are more like the role, instead of trying to do a certification. So you can do that in many ways. And I always tell people this, go and build a product. The best way to learn product management is to build a product, plain and simple. This is something that is unanimous across a lot of product leaders. If you read a lot of their blogs, that's what they say, that's what they mention. Of course, building a product is very difficult. You can't do it on your own, especially as a product manager. You're not supposed to be able to do that on your own. So that's what I always recommend. Go to communities, try and find other people who can help you build that product. Whether that's like community of designers, community of developers, we had a speaker who recommended going to be a product manager for open source projects, because some of those people need some guidance in terms of like, oh, what do I do? How do I actually bring my idea to life and contribute back to this open source project? So there are several ways that you can do. Some are easier than others, and it's definitely a long journey. Not only would it make you stand out when you're trying to apply and interview for jobs, but it's also going to prepare you for the role. Like once you land that job, you feel a lot more comfortable because you've done it before. There wouldn't be that heavy ramp up time because you know what it feels like to be in that environment. So that's what I'll recommend over any certification. So that is sort of like my advice. Hopefully that was helpful. So we're short on time, but I will take the remaining 2 questions and then we'll sort of like open it up for networking. Cool. So next question from Taibat. Hopefully I said your name well. I apologize if I didn't. Could you go ahead and unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, you did. That's fine. Yeah, so I kind of had similar questions to the ones you've just answered because I went on the site, on the collab, and then I noticed that there wasn't really a boot camp for product management. So now that you mentioned about the 8 weeks and the 4 weeks, is it also on the website? Because I literally checked like last week and I didn't see anything there. I'm not sure if I'm going the wrong route.
So like I can send you the direct link, but yeah, this is all the information about our product management program. So it's 4 weeks and then 8 weeks. So you do have to start with a 4-week program first, and then from there you then get the invitation for the 8-week program. If you work through the application form, it actually that gives you all the information. There's also a video there that you can actually watch that will give you more information about it.
Okay. And also another question, I think you kind of answered it, but just more like to be clear, about what you mentioned about the certificates and stuff. So when I look into like many of the requirements that, for some job postings, usually there it says that they expected you to know this or know that, like to have awareness of certain things. Wouldn't that fall under the theoretical part of being a project management, for example?
Again, it really depends what they're asking for, but if you think about, if you do the practical, it implies you understand the theory, at least from if they're asking for certain things and you've actually done it before, it implies that you've tried to figure out or find out or try to solve a problem on how to use some of those things. So I think the problems that I have with certifications is that they strictly just focus on theory. There are a lot of like case studies, there's a lot of like presentations and theory, but it's not really practical, it's not really getting you the skills. So when you're put in a situation or they ask you a situational question or they ask you like a design question, some people are great at talking their way through it, but I do see most people struggle in that area or like taking a very long time before figuring it out. But I would say like everyone has their path. This is just like my opinion. So I always like to tell people when I say it's like, hey, you can get a certification if you want and see how that goes. But ultimately, it's the experience that is going to set you apart, because when you get rejected, most times they tell you that, hey, you don't have enough experience. They never say you don't have enough certifications. I hope that resonates, and I hope that's clear when I'm saying, as someone who was hired and who was like also job searching in this field, like I understand what hiring managers are looking for. So that's why I'm sharing that with you. So credibility over credentials, in my opinion. Hopefully that is helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Last question then. So sorry, last question. So how often do you guys give out the 4 weeks and the 8 weeks in a year? Like, is it just like something that happens once or twice? I know that, yeah.
Sorry, girl. Sorry for cutting off. What do you say? What was the second part?
I noticed on the site it says the next one is it for January 1st. So after that, like, is there supposed to be another one? Like, how often does it come around?
So we run cohorts every 5 weeks. I believe the next one is on the 14th of November. We have one which is like the 16th cohort on the 14th of November. I believe there's that. And then the one after that is January 16th. And then after that, we'll have every 5 weeks, I believe.
5 weeks. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Cool, no worries. So last question, Amit. Thank you so much for waiting and being patient. What question do you have? Happy to answer your question.
Hey, Sefunmi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Enjoying the fall while it lasts until the snow comes around. So I'm in Edmonton. Thanks for having this session. Always a pleasure attending these sessions. I wanted to maybe start off with sharing an observation and then maybe ask a question tied to that observation. I hear you. It seems like credibility is more important than credentials or certifications like the CSPO, Certified Scrum Product Owner. What I've noticed is I've been reading up a little bit on product management lately, and there seems to be a lot of noise. If you look at Reddit, Quora, Blind, there's a lot of divide. I'm noticing people, and again, I understand it's not a requirement, you don't really need them, but I'm noticing a lot of people just doing programs like computer science, MS, MBAs, just so that they can get into product management. But on the flip side, I also see that you don't really need it. Maybe a few companies like the Amazon prefers MBA, Google prefers more technical background. So there seems to be that noise that I've noticed. So just an observation I wanted to share. The question I had was, it seems like to get into product, the best thing is to build products and get that experience. But maybe once you're in the role, moving up in the product career path, maybe product manager, senior product manager, group product manager, all the way to CPO, the terminal role, maybe the terminal might be CEO. To move up the career path, would not having some of these credentials be a roadblock?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, so this is, from what I understand, so I worked at Apple, I worked at Microsoft, and even with other startups, ultimately, in order to advance, you need to do something big, ultimately. And yes, having some credentials might help, but ultimately, when you show that you're someone that can get stuff done, I think that has favored a lot more people than it hasn't. And I'll give you an example. So the best sets of products come with risky bets. Like when you're going to invest a lot of money or time or resources in something, like that has to have like a huge outcome. So when you lead initiatives that have huge outcomes, and it takes someone to be bold enough to actually make those steps. If you think about like Satya, before he became Microsoft CEO, he was running Azure. He had like an entire product group. There was someone that was running Office, there was someone that was running Surface, there was someone that was running like a bunch of other orgs in Microsoft. But he performed all of them. And cloud wasn't something that Microsoft particularly did first. Amazon did that, but he had that foresight to catch up and do the work. And then when it was time to pick a CEO, it becomes like no question. Same thing with Sundar. When he was leading, Sundar actually started as a product manager at Google, which is like remarkable. And a lot of times people say, yes, he has an MBA from this and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately is the work that he did at Google. If you look at his other peers and the other product lines that Google has, like nothing performed better than the products that he was leading. So you need to show that you can ship and you can identify things that can solve amazing problems and you can take risky bets, because that's how you move up in your career in anywhere. They're not going to look at you if you're a senior product manager before you become a VP and say, oh, this person didn't go to school. In fact, when I was on Microsoft, my manager didn't actually go to college. I think it was like a principal PM that was leading people who had multiple degrees and multiple MBAs and from amazing fancy schools like Harvard and MIT. But the way he grew his career, when I had conversations with him, he did the work early on to show and prove to himself and his upper management that he could actually do the work, see the impact, take risky bets, and you get rewarded for that. So while it's easy to see that, if you look at everyone at the top, that, they check a bunch of these boxes, but another box to like really look at is like, hey, what have they done? What is their track record? Or what has caused them to be seen in that light? Because you're not going to be judged for a decision that you made 5-10 years ago, because that's when you probably have time to do your MBA. By the time you're getting ready for a VP of product or a CPO role, they're not going to use that decision to try and make sure. They're going to use the decision you made in the previous 5 years in that company or in previous companies. What have you done to be able to actually get you to that level? So that's how I view it. Same reason why a lot of companies value entrepreneurship, because if someone has done the work to build a business and that person tells me they want to be a product manager, I would pick that person because the person has been there, done that, understands all the things, and has been through all the trenches. And I think that speaks volume over just like, I went to this school, I have this certificate that doesn't tell me much about you. But I think that's a good question. It's something that, I will certainly ponder over, because like I think about that all the time for myself, because I don't have an MBA and I don't have a master's. I don't plan to get a master's. And I mean, you obviously know a lot of the stories in Silicon Valley of like people building companies and they didn't even graduate college. So what do we even say about them? So yeah, that's my response to the question. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, one thing about me is I have very unpopular takes, but I always share them with the caveat of like, hey, that is how I view it. But I do understand that we also live in a world that is unfair. So I know a lot of people like to check as many boxes as they can. So nothing can be, you can dispute anything that comes with when it's time for you to be in a place that you desire to be. But yeah, so thank you so much for asking that question. Do you have any other follow-up questions, Amit? Oh, yes, you are mute. Any other follow-up questions?
No, that sounds really good. I know that some of these credentials, they come with a high opportunity cost and definitely something to ponder upon. But no, thank you for sharing your insights and having these sessions. Always a pleasure attending here.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you all for hanging out with me for the past hour and asking amazing questions. I really do appreciate it. So now I'm going to like open breakout rooms. If you're interested, feel free to like stay behind, do some networking, ask more questions. I'll try and also go around and and just like hang around in some of the breakout rooms if anyone has any additional questions, and I will take it from there. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I'll be opening the breakout rooms shortly.